they're standing on the faith that they have in Yeshua, and this man that's been healed, this cripple of 40 years, has now got the attention of all of Jerusalem, and it is in danger of tipping the status quo. So this dissident that they hung on the tree 2 months earlier and they put down, now the problems are arising again, aren't they? 13. Now when they saw the boldness of Kepha and Yochanan and perceived that they were unlearned and ignorant men, they marveled and they took special note that they had been with Yeshua. So they began to recognize who they were. Moreover, since they could see the man who was healed standing with them, they could say nothing against it. But when they had commanded them to go outside of the Sanhedrin, they conferred among themselves, saying, "What shall we do to these men? For they indeed have done a notable thing, which is manifest to all who dwell in Jerusalem, and we cannot possibly deny it. But that it spread no further among the people, let us strictly threaten them that they should speak no more in this name from now on." And they called them and commanded them not to speak at all, nor teach in the name of Yeshua. But Kepha and Yochanan answered and said to them, "Whether it is right in the sight of Elohim to listen to you more than to Yahweh, you can judge. We just cannot stop speaking about the things which we have seen and heard." Verse 20, and we'll leave that there for the continuous reading, and we'll get into it verse by verse. But notice how they're speaking very respectfully to the Sanhedrin. They're not provoking them or anything. If you look carefully at that, in verse 19, verse 20. No, verse 19. But Kepha and Yochanan answered and said to them, "Whether it is right in the sight of Elohim to listen to you more than to Yahweh, you can judge." It's interesting the different translations there, because it's a really good translation to use for getting earthly counsel among learned men of Yahweh, and not just going off and seeking Yahweh on your own and totally ignoring advice from other people who are professing to be part of Israel, members of the faith. Now, if we look at the first verse, let's go back to the first verse of chapter 4 of the book of Acts. And it says, "Now while they were speaking to the people, the Kohanim, the priests, and the Sar-Zevah Ha-Hekol," that means the captain of the guard, of the temple soldiers, who were not Jews, but they were a race of people called the Druze. So you had the Kohen there, and we know that a lot of the Kohanim were of Edomite stock. They were sons of Esau. You could call them Jordanians. And we know that Yeshua had cleansed the temple and routed out most of them, and had only those who were of the lineage of Aaron and Levites. And but by now they'd probably brought them all back in. And so we don't really have many Jews on this front either, do we? And the Druze, the temple guards, they're the sons of Jethro. So they're a race, they're a tribe of Arabs that have no allegiance to any other tribe of Israel except to the priesthood. So they're like a race of bodyguards. That's interesting, isn't it? So far we've not got many Jews in the equation here that are the bad guys. Isn't that interesting? And we can have a look here, the Druze, if you Google it and you do a bit of research on these guys, the Druze people reside primarily in Israel, Syria and Lebanon. They are an Arab-speaking community, loyal to the state that has suffered hundreds of casualties in its defence, and whose men serve today in high-ranking and sensitive positions within the IDF, or the Security Forces of Israel. In Israel, the majority of Druze consider themselves a distinct ethnic group and do not identify themselves as Arab. Okay? In Hebrew, they're all called Druzim, plural. So, in Israel today, the only other supposed Arab group that can join the IDF, and this is you've got to be Israel, or you've got to be these guys, other Druze. There are prayer police, which you find on the Temple Mount. A lot of those guys are Palestinian. They're sort of like more police though than in the idea. But and that's the flag there. That's the Druze flag. So that's something that I found very, very interesting and did a little bit of research on. Now the Sadducees were a sect of Jews formed around the time of the Hasmoneans. And so some of the Sadducees could trace their lineage back to the Hasmonean period, going back to Hanukkah. Yeah, the battle against the Seleucian Greeks and Antiochus Epiphanes. And over the years, well, they sort of become corrupted and become more of a political party rather than have any sort of religious weight in terms of listening to the Heavenly Father and running the temple according to His will. They upheld the authority of the written law and the written law only. They did hold none of the oral traditions that the Pharisees held in high esteem. But you can argue that they did to a degree. It's impossible. Here's a tip. It's absolutely impossible to keep Torah and ignore every conceivable oral tradition of the Pharisees whilst doing it. Years ago I had a woman and she said, we had a fantastic Pesach, it wasn't rabbinical at all. And I began to ask her what she did during that Seder. And within about 2 seconds I said, stop there, that's rabbinical. If you look at the laws of the Passover Seder, or Pesach, there really is no Seder there. You've just got the bare bones there, as you do with most of the commandments. For example, Shavuot. What do you do on Shavuot? Oh, you wave a loaf, you pour some oil on it. There's really no order of service there. You have to work it out through deductive reasoning, delving into the text, looking at the traditions of our forefathers, which we are told as Nazarenes not to forsake incidentally. So no one could possibly, not even the Karaites, they don't even exist in their observance of Torah without not observing some of the Pharisaic traditions. The Sadducees believed to have a small following drawn primarily from the ruling class, the upper class. So these people were from elitist families who became Sadducees, a lot of them. Eventually they reached an accommodation with the Pharisees, which allowed them to serve as priests in exchange for acceptance of Pharisaical rulings regarding the law. So they basically, the Sadducees were such a powerful movement that they threatened to actually overshadow the Pharisees at one stage. So the Pharisees basically sort of made a bargain with the Sadducees, and that they both would appear on the one Sanhedrin. And so certain things were agreed upon, the Sadducees could get away with and the Pharisees would turn a blind eye to it, and vice versa. And so technically there were two Sanhedrin being merged into one. Now you can't do that, that's not Torah, you can't really do that. But you had a Sadducee arm of the Sanhedrin and a Pharisaic arm of the Sanhedrin. They kind of both groups put up with one another. And we see that later when Shaul is brought before them and he's talking about the resurrection of the dead. And one of the Pharisees in the Sanhedrin gets up and goes, what do we care about the resurrection of the dead? We have no problem with that. And so what Shaul's doing, he's dividing the council. He knows what's going on. He knows how to basically turn these guys on one another, and in the process, bring Yeshua to the fore of what's going on. Exactly. So really, there's three Sanhedrins. There's the Sanhedrin. We'll look at this a bit later. I think I've got a verse reference there. You've got the Pharisees, you've got the Sadducees, and you've got the Qumran community who were the actual legitimate guys. And they lived out in the desert, didn't they? And they thought both the Sadducees and the Pharisees were nutcases. Yeah? So that's the who's who is being addressed there. Verse 2, being greatly annoyed because they were teaching Ha'ayom, the native people, and preaching in Yahushua the Tikriot Ma'ahamesim, preaching Yeshua's resurrection from the dead. Oh man, so the Sadducees are wiped out on two, they're frustrated on two levels, aren't they? Let's have a look at them. Kepha and Yochanan's message assaulted the sensibilities of the Pharisees on two levels. Firstly, they preached in the name of the one they executed just 2 months prior. Yeah? So in the very room in the Hall of Hewn Stone where they had Yeshua, they now had these two other guys who just made a man's legs, which were pretty much, toothpicks, become healthy legs he can run and leap and dance on, in his name, Yeshua's name, who they executed. And so they're like freaking out, because who knows what these guys are going to do next? They might resurrect somebody from the dead. Then what are they going to do? So they're going, oh my goodness, this is out of control. What are we going to do? We have to really think about this, because this might just be the thin end of the wedge, this guy being able to walk. So they're really annoyed on the fact that they're preaching in Yeshua's name, and they taught on the resurrection of the dead, which they did not believe, according to Mark 12:18 and Acts 23:8. And that's a fundamental thing to the Sadducees' belief system, because when you look at the Torah, the first 5 books of Moshe, on the surface there appears to be no reference to the world to come and to any type of resurrection and so on and so forth. That's not true. There is reference there, but you have to look really hard to study. And there's plenty of references there in the Torah to a world to come, to an afterlife, and so on and so forth. But because it's not obvious, the Sadducees didn't want really any part to do with it. This was the best it was going to get, in other words. And furthermore, the Sadducees couldn't produce a body of Messiah. If they were able to, they would have wheeled this guy out, and they would have exhumed his corpse, and they say, so you're saying you're doing these things in the name of this dead rabbi. Is that what you're saying? They couldn't produce a body, and that was annoying them. Even though it was guarded, it was heavily guarded, the tomb. They had weathered reports of Yeshua's resurrection. 11 appearances are recorded. There could have been more, but in the scriptures there is 11 appearances of Yeshua HaMashiach recorded. Why didn't he appear to these guys? Have you ever wondered that? Have you ever wondered, why didn't he just front up to Caiaphas' house and Ananias' house? Say, hi! You couldn't kill me! Why didn't he do that? Because he's a merciful Elohim. He only appeared mainly to those who believed who he was, right? Because what's happening now? What are we reading about in this chapter? What's happening right now in this very chapter? Yahweh is giving him a chance to go, you know what? We did the wrong thing. We killed the author of life. Help us. Save our souls. Isn't that amazing? Because I'm about to read to you, everybody gets wheeled out in a minute. Caiaphas, Ananias, Alexander, who basically funds the whole temple. So it's an important thing that's come to their attention. They've been rattled also by reports of people that had risen out of their tombs. There were reports all over Jerusalem that people that had been deceased, and in some cases long dead, had risen up out of their tombs and were witnessing. And then they vanished. What does it say in Matthew 27:52? It says, the earth shook, the rocks split, and the tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. Christians will tell you about the curtain tearing and how awesome that was. Not many will tell you about that. Because you know what I think that does? I think that in most people's minds who profess to follow the Bible and elevate Yeshua don't want that to steal the thunder. And it doesn't steal the thunder. In fact, it empowers the message all the more to say that this resurrection didn't just confine itself to Yeshua. He's such a powerful guy, he's so awesome you can't even touch him. Yeshua himself said, you'll do greater works than I. And we're beginning to see them now with Yochanan and Kepha standing before the Sanhedrin. Verse 3, and they took them with their hands, and they put them in the Beit Hashar, the house of restriction, until the next day, for it was already evening. Rabbi Kepha and Rabbi Yochanan had begun speaking at 3 p.m. Verse 3 tells us it was now evening, which would be at least 6 p.m. They had talked about these things for a considerable time. That's a pretty awesome preacher who can preach for 3 hours and not lose anyone. In fact, multiply followers by the thousands. The peace and quiet of the temple had been disturbed. It must have been clear that this unexpected event was going to threaten Jerusalem's status quo. The Sadducees looked like they were in trouble, big trouble. They were basically politicians. They controlled the religious mood of the people. The high priest was a Sadducee. His father, who was formerly a high priest, was a Sadducee. He was still pretty much running the show. They'd apparently been scalded, hadn't they? Because they adjourned until the following day. So, could it be that the Pharisaic arm of the Sanhedrin scalded the Sadducees for what they did to Yeshua and they did the night trial, and now they're going, all right, we'll do it now? Isn't that interesting? Don't you find that interesting? And as I said, you've got three Sanhedrin. You've got the Sadducee arm, you've got the Pharisaic arm, which emerged, and you've got the real deal out in the Qumran community, or out in the desert somewhere. According to Acts 23:6, but Shaul, knowing that one part of the Sanhedrin consisted of Zadokim and the other Peroshim, Pharisees. See, that's a little bit later on in Acts. Verse 4, many of the ones having listened to the Devar Hashem, the word of the name, or Yahweh, had emunah, meaning, had faith, real-time faith. And the number of the men came to be Lavdavka Chomeshet Alufim, 3,000, approximately 3,000. Now, various 5,000, various translations will have 3,000, somewhere 5,000. What's the problem? Why is there a change in this figure? It is Rob Miller's belief, which is fairly interesting, that the number of 5,000 may have been the entirety of those, and 3,000 then may have been more than one. It's an interesting view on it, but that's one theory which my rabbi goes with. But neither one is an incorrect figure. They just give you a little bit more insight as to how many there's converted males or males within the whole overall population. Females. Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Yochanan didn't have an opportunity to see how many people came to the proclamation of faith. That happens to us all the time, doesn't it? We'll go out, we'll share the message, we'll go away, you don't know what seeds you planted. You know how you often say that to somebody, or you'll hear it said by somebody else? Well, you don't know if you planted a seed or not. These guys planted some serious seed, didn't they? And they didn't get to see what was going to happen, what happened. Yeah? All these people were added while they're in there parlaying with the Sanhedrin, yeah? with the Pharisees and with the Sadducees. So this is encouraging. When the full message is preached, that we don't necessarily get to see the converts, they're there nonetheless. They have the potential to be there nonetheless, don't they? The Greek, here it is. The Greek may mean became 5,000 men. So some writers today understand this to mean the total number of believers was 5,000. There is also a great number of women who believe Jerusalem's total population at this time was probably 60,000 to 80,000. The estimates vary. Though the number who believe seems irrelevant to the narrative, it's the overarching purpose of events is nonetheless exhibited there. Verse 5, and it came about on the next day, the Menachim, the leaders, and the Zechenim, the elders, and the Sopharim, the judges, were gathered together in Jerusalem. Okay, so everybody's been brought in. It's the following day. Now that you're going to witness an official seating of the Sanhedrin as it was at that time, however dodgy up it was. And so Peter and Yochanan are coming before them. Verse 6, also Anon or Ananias, the Kohen Hagadol, and Caiaphas, and Yochanan, and Alexander. Now Alexander was a benefactor. He was the richest man in Jerusalem, and he was a temple benefactor and highly esteemed by King Agrippa the first. And Xander, the Yiddish form of Alexander, you'll still see prevalent today in many Jewish names because Alexander the Great did so well by the Jews. They've actually he did. That's the story. He wanted, and they said no. Rather than place the idol, we name our sons after him. Yeah, but yeah, that's exactly what happened. Exactly. But long story short, they named their kids after Alexander because he did treat the Jews fairly well during his lifetime. The Jewish authorities mentioned here represent the temple authorities and their sympathizers and the Sanhedrin. So everybody's brought along here. Ananias is called the high priest. He'd been removed from office by the Romans in 15 CE, but the priests still considered him the true high priest. That's why it's got in there the Kohen, the high priest. So Caiaphas was officially the high priest, and Ananias was the power behind the office. That's just so wrong, isn't it? According to Torah, how the priestly office should function, this was just such a perverted version, wasn't it? This situation must have seemed extremely serious for this group of dignitaries to all be assembled impromptuly in one room. Yeah. Verse 7, and when they had placed the Mashiach Shluchim, the sent ones of Messiah, in their midst, they were inquiring, by what power or in what Shem, in what name or authority have you done this? Now, when you stand before the Sanhedrin, or you want a motion to be carried, it is often traditional that you will say in whose name this precedence or this halakha that you wish to set is to be carried. You might say in the name of Rabbi Akiva. And as soon as you say the name of Rabbi Akiva, all the men on the assembly will know of Rabbi Akiva, what he achieved, what his outcome was in his life, and they straight away get a sense of what you're going to say and what authority that's stamped with. It's almost like in a court situation where you have Holloway versus Kramer. In the case of Holloway versus Kramer, and you then go in and do the rhetoric of what you want to get across in your point. So it's a similar type of thing, right? So these guys are using Yeshua's name in that vein, aren't they? And so it's causing a controversy because he was this Galilean that a lot of the Pharisees didn't know how to take him. So Pharisees really detested him, and the Sadducees certainly didn't like him because what he was doing wasn't fitting into their concept of truth, wasn't it? If I don't believe that people can be resurrected from the dead and I'm seeing it and hearing it, that's going to ruin my day, isn't it? Either my theology has to change, or I've really got to put it down, or I've got to get out of the geographical location and go somewhere where I'm not contradictory in what I believe and what's happening. The council would have sat in a semicircle. Why did they sit in a semicircle? So when anybody comes before the council, they've all got a good view. Nobody is obstructed by seeing the person that's coming before the council. You can see facial expressions, reactions to questions, and so on and so forth. Everybody's got a good view. The same place Rabbi Yeshua stood a couple of months before, as I said, where they determined that he should be crucified, hung on a tree. But instead of the crucifixion bringing an end to the Messianic movement, now the name of Rabbi Yeshua, Rebbe means my beloved rabbi, surfaces now in a dramatic way with his healing of his cripple near the Eastern Gate, or the Beautiful Gate as it were. They asked two questions of the disciples. First, how were you able to heal the man? In whose name? What's the precedent? The second, who gave you this ability? There is not one note of praise for these men by what they've done for the Sanhedrin. And this guy's standing there going, I'm pretty happy. I'm happy. I don't care what's going on. I've got my legs back. I've never had them, so I've got legs, and they work. And so that's just absurd. Essentially, they're about to be arrested for doing a good deed. And so you can sort of see that how seedy it all is in its function. Verse 8. Then Kepha, having been filled with the Ruach HaKodesh, said to them, Sarei ha'am zekonim, meaning the rulers of the nation of elders. So he's addressing the rulers and the elders of the nation, and he's doing it with respect. They're not speaking like they've got chips on their shoulders. They're showing great respect here to the men who are assembled in front of them as authoritative figures. Whether they should be there or not is beside the point. Rabbi Kepha was filled with the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh. It's a fresh filling, isn't it? Yahweh's Spirit was there to meet the need of that moment. In Luke 21, verses 12 and 15, Rabbi Yeshua had given his disciples instructions for such a time as this when he said, excuse me, they will lay their hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues and prisons. You will be brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake, but it will turn out for you as an occasion for testimony. Not as an occasion to do healings or signs and wonders, but as a witness as a witness, as a testimony. Those other things will all travel in the wake of that ministry. Therefore, settle it in your hearts not to meditate beforehand on what you will answer, for I will give you a mouth and wisdom which all your adversaries will not be able to contradict or resist. We're seeing that situation right here, aren't we? Isn't it amazing? It's almost a textbook example of what we're actually seeing. Verse 9. If we today, and this is key for continuing, if we today are exempt on account of the ma'aseh atov, the good deed done to a handicapped man, as to by what means this one has been given complete healing, refuah shlema, we're familiar with that term. Shlema? Yeah. We're all familiar with that term, anyway, most of us. Verse 10, let it be known to all of you and Kol Israel, the whole of Israel, family of Israel, that Bashem, the name of Rebbe Melech, King Messiah Yeshua, by the name of our beloved Rebbe, King Messiah Yeshua, of Nazareth, of the branch, whom you hanged on a haretz, on a tree, according to Deuteronomy 21:22, what does it say? He who hangs on the tree will be cursed. And so he's basically saying, you guys knew full well what you were doing. And in his name, that one that you put to death, you hung on the tree, we're doing something like this. And the crippled man jumps. So this is Yahweh's mercy. Look what you did. Now look at what's happening. Is this movement being put down after his death, or is it rising? Is it now even more powerful than it once was? So you be the judge. And so this was their opportunity to go, you guys are the real deal. We have to do a reshuffle, don't we? What do we do? Didn't happen though, did it? Verse 11. He, Yahushua, is Haven Ma'asu. He is the stone the builders, you builders rejected. You builders of the Torah, you rejected him. Just like the stone that Yaakov anointed was rejected in the construction of the Temple of Shlomo because it was too jagged and looked like it was going to crack. Yeshua, the capstone, was also rejected. But he became the very cornerstone, didn't he? Now, what's the only structure known to man where the cornerstone sits at the direct center and uppermost point of it? The pyramid, yeah. The pyramid. And so the pyramid in the Giza Plateau, that doesn't have a capstone, does it? And the legend is that they couldn't find a capstone to do that pyramid when it was in its heyday, or pillar of Enoch we call it, justice. But we know the capstone is going to be there again one day. We know that the pyramid, the pillar of Enoch, it's a three-dimensional dalet. It's a three-dimensional dalet. What is the Star of David made of? Two inverted dalets. What's going to happen when Yeshua comes? An inverted dalet comes down over the top of the one we've got here in Egypt. Well, it's not actually in Egypt, that's actually part of Israel, isn't it? It's on the border of Israel. It's called Egypt now. So this stone, this keystone, this capstone, that might not look too good, is the keystone, is the cornerstone, the linchpin of the whole structure. Verse 12. And there is no Yeshuot Eloheinu. There's no salvation of Elohim in any other, for there is no other name, no other Shem under Shemayim, under the heavens, that has been given among Bnei Adam, the sons of Adam, literally you human beings, by which it is necessary for you to be spared. The Mishpat Hashem in the Yom Hadin, the family of Yahweh, or the name on the day of judgment. It is absurd that they would have been arrested for a good deed, these two guys, but it's happening. They healed a man by the name of King Messiah Yeshua. His name has power because he's risen and exalted. Yeah? The promised salvation which the Jews hoped for would be bought by Messiah has now come in the name of Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Akiva makes it clear the Messiah, who is King Yeshua, is the only way of salvation. Verse 13 and 14, now observing the bitochin, the boldness of Kipha and Yochanan, and having perceived that they were not yeshiva trained, they marveled and began to recognize them that they had been with Yeshua. Who marveled? A bunch of Pharisees and rabbis when he was about 12. Yeah. At the close of Yeshua's bar mitzvah, well, he'd actually finished the bar mitzvah, hadn't he? But he came back for a second helping. Because when you do your bar mitzvah, you get up there and you wax a little bit lyrically on some verses that mean a lot to you. You kind of do your thing and it's over and everybody has a big banquet and a meal. Yeshua's kind of like a bit like a Rabbi Rob. He doesn't know when to stop and he'll just ride the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, and he'll keep speaking. So he went back for another helping, and that's why his parents kind of started to haul out of town and went, hey, where is he? He's back there teaching because that's what he loved to do, and that was his mission, that was his calling. Was he at age 12 yeshiva trained? No. And later on you see the Pharisees also make that observation about Yeshua, that who is this man having, though he's not studied, that he speaks so eloquently. Don't ask me the verse, but it's definitely there. So what is that telling us? If you lean into Yahweh, if you allow the Ruach HaKodesh to come upon you and you don't be resistant toward it, but you allow it to do its work in you, don't feel so anxious about missing out on all these orthodox classes that the Jews are holding and so on and so forth. Yeah? Because if the Ruach is in you, you'll make an Orthodox Jew hey, wow, this guy's actually knows what he's talking about, because he's not a Jew. He hasn't studied in our yeshiva, he hasn't come to any of our classes on Hebrew, but he's got something in what he's saying that's resonating with me, and yet he's untrained, he's unlearned. So not all of us need to sort of feel that we're missing out on anything in the Orthodox Jewish community when they have all these awesome things going. Great, it's great to get along to maybe one once in a while, but you've got Yeshua, and that trumps all of that. And when the Ruach, the Spirit is on you, it'll give you words to speak that won't be your own anyway. Now, untrained means trained in accordance to Greek rhetoric and Hellenistic philosophy, as the Arab false priestly aristocracy would be. Now, that sounds a little bit contradictory to what I said, but I've checked Rob's audio appraisal of the interpretation, and the first one that I was telling you, that's definitely the truer rendering of it. Now, it might mean that the way they delivered what they were talking about wasn't, didn't happen to have all its Hellenistic hallmarks in what they were saying, but it was certainly the fact that they were not trained in yeshiva. They were trained under a recognized rabbi. Yeshua, where was their shul? Where was their house of study? In Capernaum. I've been there. I've seen Rabbi Akiva's family home, his fishing and pickle business in Capernaum. I've been there. I've seen the synagogue that Yeshua would have preached and taught in. I've seen the ruins of the outlying yeshiva that was around the synagogue. Yeah. They've rebuilt another one on top. They've rebuilt another, and that's since fallen in ruin. But there are remains of the original one that are still there because it wasn't completely razed to the floor. Yeah. It's interesting. So they were of the school of Yeshua, weren't they? Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yochanan were Nazarim, of the offshoot branch sect of the Jews, and they were of the school of Yeshua. You have the school of Shammai, you have the school of Hillel, you have the school of Akiva, you have the school of whatever, right? A different rabbi, Gamliel. Yeah, Gamliel, of course. Yeah, we're about to see Gamliel in the next chapter, well, later on in this chapter. We're going to probably drop short of that today, but Yeshua, the school of Yeshua, guess what? He's the most well-known, isn't he? Even by those that don't even really know what he's about, he's easily the most well-known sage Jewish rabbi of all time, isn't he? Why are you laughing? Oh, sorry. Yes.
Because he comes to people, not people come to Yeshua.
Yes, he did. He did. Yeah, he did. For a while, though, he did attend the synagogue. He was teaching. He was training. We see. Remember when he has his mass desertion? He goes up and does a teaching, and all his disciples basically walk out on him. And he asks his inner circle, "You guys going to leave me too?" And they say, "Well, where would we go?" So we do see him doing hard yards. It's not all, "Hey, I'm on tour." Rabbi on tour, Messiah rabbi on tour. You see hard yards being done by this guy. So we're very much of the school of Yeshua, not the school of Hillel, not the school of Gamaliel. Although I've got no problem with a lot of the teachings of these rabbis and their schools of thought. But Yeshua trumps everything. We need to become so familiar with Yeshua's teachings that it just rolls off the tongue. That enthusiasm that we have for Judaism, that's fine. I don't want to steal that out of anyone's heart. But we need to be able to have Yeshua trump anything that might be contradictory in any of that teaching that you might. Alright. So the apostles, Ananias and Caiaphas, are once again confronted with Rabbi Yeshua. Through the apostles, they're confronted again with Rabbi Yeshua. Not the actual Rabbi Yeshua, but through his shluchim, through his sent ones. Had they been able to produce the body of Rabbi Yeshua, it would have discredited the Messianic movement. They couldn't do that, but they could not because he'd risen. In his great mercy, Yahweh gave the authorities every opportunity to see the facts and to hear the full message, but they chose to reject it, sealing their end, really. Verse 15. And having ordered the shluchim, the apostles, to step aside the council chambers, they began conferring with one another. 16 and 17 says, saying, "What should we do with these Anoshim, these brothers?" So that's obviously a Sadducee there. That's a Jewish lineage, referring to them as brothers. For that a remarkable or miraculous sign has occurred through them is evident to all the ones inhabiting Jerusalem, or Yerushalayim, and we are not able to make hakahasha, denial of the fact. Wow. But lest it be spread further among the Hayom Yisrael, the native people of Israel, let us warn them no longer to speak to any man Vashem Hazah in his name, in Yeshua's name. And having summoned them, they commanded them not to drashot, to say drashot regarding shirim, lessons. Basically, hang on. They commanded them not to say things regarding lessons in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach at all. And that supports Amos 7:13. Why would anyone want to deny this miracle? The miracle did not fit their concept of truth, the Pharisees and the Sadducees' concept of the met, the truth. So though they had all the evidence clearly in front of them, they could not accept it, they did not want to accept the truth, and they could not deny the truth at the same time. It's interesting to note that Rabbi Silas, Luke, had accurate information of this closed-door meeting, as I said before, alluded to before. Possibly Rabbi Shaul was present, who later informed his companion Rabbi Silas of the meeting's dialogue. Interesting. Verse 19, but Kepha and Yochanan in reply said to them, if it is told, if it is good before Yahweh to listen to you rather than to Hashem, to Yahweh, you being the Bet Din and all. So he's basically saying, you know what? It is good for us to receive counsel from the Bet Din, from the house of judgment, yeah? And it is good to observe those decrees and those counsels. So he's continuing speaking very respectful. We would otherwise do what you've asked us to do. Yeah? So we can agree, can't we? We can agree with rabbis, and we can disagree and agree with rabbis, and when we disagree, we can still do it respectfully, can't we? And it goes on in verse 21, and when they had threatened them further, they released them, finding no basis on which they might punish them, because of the people, Vahabal, since all were crying, Baruch Yahweh, on account of what had happened. Verse 22, for the man was more than Ben Ba'amaseh Shana, 40 years old, upon whom this oath or this miraculous sign of refuah of healing had been brought about. So they had to let him go, didn't they? They had to let him go. This would look bad. This guy just healed this fella that's never walked for 40 years. Everybody's excited. There's a buzz in the air. And they're not idiots. They're speaking quite eloquently and they know what they're talking about. They're impressing us. If we kill them or throw them in jail or do them any harm, it's going to be Yeshua all over again, isn't it, potentially? It demonstrated to the people that the council had no case against the disciples and that Yahweh had delivered them. In addition, it motivated the disciples in their purpose. Every now and then Yahweh is going to give you a little bit of boost of a motivation. At the moment, we're a little bit demotivated, I know I am. But every now and then, He will give you a little boost where you need it. And we shouldn't shuck that. We shouldn't go, I don't care about that, I'm just going to do His will. No, listen, it's okay every now and then. When He does give you a boost, He does give you a pat on the back. Acknowledge it and use it to motivate you to continue to spread the full messianic message of the Gospels to the four corners of the earth. Because that's our mission. And that's the example being set here now by these two shlukim, these two Nazarenes, John and Peter, Yochanan and Peter. And so we'll leave it there today. We're not quite finished chapter 4. A little bit of that to go. But I really want to get into some meat in the next couple of verses. And I don't want to lose anybody. Are there any questions about what we shared with chapter 4 of the Acts of the Apostles? Is everybody kind of getting into the story? Yeah. Yeah. That's basically what we're trying to do. Yeah, there is, isn't there? And I have just scratched the surface. I will send everybody the notes via email. You know what's really, really interesting? We do have a case. And there was a recorded incident, and I'm sure it was happening more than once, where the Pharisees would try and cast out a demon in Yeshua's name. And it became common knowledge because of what that demon inhabiting that person ended up doing to them. So you had Pharisees, even though they didn't want to be a part of the faith, they could see that there was some power in it. And all they wanted...
Did they proceed it?
Yeah. So what does that tell you? Hang on, what does that tell you? That tells you if they wanted to basically get this exorcism done right, so they drew on what they thought was really going to do it, without committing themselves, and that's just insane. Yeah. And so deep down, there was a few Pharisees who didn't convert, didn't become Nazarenes, but deep down, and you can sense it when you're reading those passages we just read. There are people on that council, probably a lot of Pharisees and the Pharisaic army in the Sanhedrin. Their insides are squirmed. Yeah. In secret. Yeah. And that's fine. Yeah, keep it. Let them keep it secret. You know what I say? Why does the Orthodox Jewish world have to make a public profession that they're embracing Yeshua? Why? They don't have to do anything of the sort.
Somehow it is not anymore prohibited to consider seeing what happening now that actually not applies having that to the room. seems to be that seems to be what something between as usual and the different knowledge of such extended something like
We don't know. Yeah, that's the thing. We don't know in quiet moments what Orthodox Jews are out there, what their numbers are like, how forlorn they are in their minds of their own acceptance. Whether there are some that know that it's the truth but are hating it, like the example I just gave you. We don't know, but like those 3,000, 5,000 that had it. These guys were busy being delivered up in the synagogue. Had hands laid on them and dragged them in there, and they're making a testimony for our King and Messiah. While the initial, they've ignited the furor outside, and people are filling up the mikveh houses daily. And it's just amazing. A lot of Pharisees, we know a lot of Pharisees met some
that. And they start because of the pure. But that's the second spirit comes that they definitely, still deny. But that was like loneliness.
Yeah.
And as we see that the reality is changing.
Yes. And it's gradual. And it's very much dependent on how our community, the Nazarene community, as it's being reborn, conducts ourselves.
We can pray for that to be better with us.
Yeah.
Because we are so ashamed, we will be here, and we continue to pray and hope and the heart and all of our
Christianity has Jesus, which is not the Messiah. He's poor, broken, blue eyes, blonde hair. We need to show them the real Messiah that we believe in, which the day before was right for us and was good. And that's what we need to.
It's ultra-Orthodox.
We need to show them the years
It's
of
ultra-Orthodox.
Jesus, who is not the Messiah. They don't know the true Messiah, and we have a mission to show them what the true Messiah is. Maybe then they will start to believe it.
Somehow what happened in Israel, because the Muslim community being a testimony, and they still find resentment, or resistance.
The Muslim community there are just Christians. When we were there,
If you talk to a Jew who's a Messianic
You have a
Jew,
two communities. You have a
he's
Messianic
basically
one,
Christian.
with the Torah observers, and you have a so-called Messianic communities which are not Torah observers. It's a difference.
Yeah, I'm sure there are.
And the not Torah observers are pro-Palestinian, and our faith is pro-Judah.
yes. That's why when you teach say that you're the Nazarene rather than Messianic, because they get very confused. Because like you said, there's two divisions of Messianic. And you don't know which one. They go, oh, you're Messianic, right? And you're believing in Christ, but you don't believe in Torah. So to save the confusion, they know what you're talking about when you say the Nazarene.
You can have a Messianic Catholic. I read not too long ago there are a group of people making an appearance who are calling themselves Messianic Catholics. And so while you can say, if you say you're a believer, how broad a term is that? There's a group of people calling themselves the Way. We're also called the Way, people of the Way. The Jews are called people of the Book. But you're only ever going to hit the nail on the head when you say you're Nazarene, Netzorim, Notzri, singular, or Nazareth, Nazareth, another version of singular, or Nazarene, you just say you're a Nazarene. If you want to really, really, really hammer it home, you say you're a Nazarene Israelite. I'm a Nazarene Israelite. And that will give somebody a clear and concise understanding of who you are. You are the same person of the sect that Shaul HaShliach, otherwise known as the Apostle Paul, who was accused of being a ringleader of this sect. We found this man, a disturber of the peace, of the Nazarene sect. We found him to be somebody who causes dissension among the brothers, a disturber of the peace of this of this Nazarene, and a ringleader of this Nazarene sect.
Eva, they were very afraid of our sect because they thought that we were going to take over. So,
Now, most of us are of Gentile background, but that doesn't matter. Once we're grafted in, we're part of Israel. We're not adopted sons. We've got to get that out of our head. We are fully in. We're not like a lesser class brother. We're fully in.
But the thing is, we're talking about this first Israel, and Israel is still a unique nation, which was born in a Jewish nation, that to the Israel Messiah had to open the road. And they become a part of the Israel.
Yeah.
But not necessarily because you may have a really belief, but you have listening to the call of Israel.
Yeah, they're not really Jews.
What is called a primary Israel, is actually Israel.
Yeah, exactly. There's thousands and thousands of people walking the face of the earth that think they are Gentiles, have an unexplained affinity with Israel and any type of thing to do with Israel. For some reason, they sort of like it. They gravitate toward it. They have a little soft spot in their heart for it, if you like. And these are not Gentiles. They are Israelites, sons of the Most High, children of Israel, scattered lost sheep, if you like, that have an identity, an unawareness about their true identity. If we spread this message, then their hearts will flare and they'll recognise the wisdom.
So that's our mission.
And that's our mission, yeah.
Israel.
Sorry.
As you know, when in the spirit of living hours, it was not such individual, well, it's only testimony what we do. Probably all of us being touched by the Ruach of the day, and that's where we are now. But it was touched by spiritual identity of Heavenly Father. Otherwise, you wouldn't stand in here, you know.
About to give Shlomo lots of money. Yeah. You're a Bondi.
Yeah. After I was thinking about money, I told myself,
If you were a kippah, you were zizi, you were a talit, gadol, you were phylacteries, although not many people will see that. It's confronting for a lot of Jews when you say you embrace. Remember that time I had that. I got hammered in that discussion with Rabbi Wernick. Initially, I don't know if you were there when we initially debated. He says, "Tell me about why you guys are here if you accept this guy." And that's what started the conversation between me and Rabbi Wernick. Because what astounds the most Jews within our most Jews who see our fellowships growing, is that there's no other Jews directing us into them what we should be doing. Yet we're having a love for Torah, we're taking on a lot of the commandments and a lot of the things that the Jews do, which is Torah, and they're just going, how does that happen? That boggles their minds. These people, all of a sudden out of nowhere, are gravitating towards putting themselves through the motions of Torah observance in their lives, and they're loving it. They're absolutely loving it. It's like they're going to a theme park, or they're about to get on a roller coaster ride. They just think that's amazing.
The other good example, Rob went to the synagogue in Britain and asked about something, and the rabbi was amazed.
Yes.
That he got such knowledge and asked for things actually, which
Is that right?
related to the high knowledge of the Bible. And he
Jeez.
responded,
Yeah. So it's amazing time. We've just got to hold the fort and buckle down the hatchets and the hatchets and get going.
I don't know if you felt that, but when we were at church, remember when we got called up and said, look, we understand that because it's new knowledge about the name,
Yes.
Yeshua and Yahweh, and you can have that, but you don't need to speak to it in church. Remember that? They
Yeah.
couldn't argue with us because we had the facts,
Yeah.
but they were like,
It's sort of like,
yeah, exactly. I felt that. I was like, I've been there. I've been in that scenario where you
all right,
decide-
here they go. Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Well, you healed the guy. It works.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
get it. But you know
We
what?
get the commandment
You know what?
before he's
We're-
ready, but
yeah.
we can't do it.
Yeah.
So don't,
We shouldn't be here, but we are, and we like our lives to stay like they are, because we get lots of esteem, lots of people love us, lots of people treat us with respect, we've got lots of money, and so you just, that's crazy.
And I
So
think that's what's happening right now in the Christian communities, where they have a lot of churches, they're sort of trying to fill the void in people because the new life is going upon them, and they want to do more influence. They want to do
Yeah.
things differently. That's why you have churches with a choice. You have churches with shelters. They're trying to fill that void without losing their
It seems to be
Roman Catholicism.
the Roman Catholicism has nothing to do with the Protestant church. It's a completely different thing about things. The Protestant church is Roman Catholicism.
Yeah, but it all started from the Roman
Is
Catholicism.
it good, anyway, good news if you're saying that different regulations and Protestant churches are heading towards
can't be bad.
probably the more likely to be towards the right way.
Absolutely. I think it's season where the Noah is falling on the lost people of Israel. And that's why the churches and other organizations, they're trying to fill that void because people are asking questions. And it's harder to hide the truth now. When you have the technology available, like you have the internet, you have Google, so people have questions instead of waiting for the minister to think that he's going to Google it. And they're like, oh, this is not right.
And obviously, it's not